What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, and folks, Austin, we did it. We've done our rookie drafts. We've done our dynasty startup drafts. I made you happy last week and we did a best ball draft, but folks, it's June and we are finally in redraft season. I could not be more excited. Austin, how are you feeling this morning, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's a good day to do a mock draft, get some practice in. I have to say, we did our best ball draft last week. And I talked about my strategy for that, and it didn't work out for me last week. But then I immediately went and did a best ball draft in Underdog, and I tried the same exact strategy, and I got it. And so
there you go.
This show helps you practice and helps you get ready for your drafts.
And that's literally what we've been talking about. And I love that you brought that up because one of the big themes from last week was that the ADP on Sleeper is very different from the ADP on Underdog. And so you may not even be done doing the same draft last week as you were once you got into Best Ball or into Underdog. Folks, we have an amazing guest this week. And before I introduce our guest, I want to talk about what this show is all about. We are all about mock drafting to help people learn fantasy football and just have fun with this game that we love so much. And when we started the show, we talked about there are so many people out there who love fantasy football and know their shit, even if they don't have a weekly podcast or write a fantasy football article for some big website. And we wanted to invite those people on the show because who doesn't love drafting and mock drafting? And we hit it out of the park this week as we have actor and writer Michael Stoyanov with us. If you are old like me, you see the gray in the beard. You know him from Blossom, but he's been in so much great stuff. But if you follow him on Twitter, you know that he knows football and he loves fantasy football. And we could not be more honored to have you on the show. Michael, welcome.
Wow. I mean, between that intro and then someone hyping me on Twitter, probably one of you two, as the great Michael Stoyanov, I'm freaking nervous, especially because this is like my first mock of the season. And like, I just hope I don't goof it up or like leave most of your viewing audience sitting there going like, this guy knows what he's talking about. Why the hell did he take that guy then? Like, which of course, that's fantasy football. There will be guys, no matter what.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say, the good news is if you mess up a mock, you mess up a mock. It's no big deal. It's when it becomes a real draft that it's a problem. And that's the whole point of this. Right, but I don't know if you've seen our show, Mike, but we have a segment at the end that I call the oops of the draft. And I find the person who made the biggest mistake in the draft. And if it's you, I'm not going to lay off just because you're on the show.
My new goal today is just to not be the oops. I don't want to be the oops guy.
That happens a lot.
Somebody will hear me say Travis Kelce instead of Travis Kelce, and they'll get up in our comments about that, saying, I don't know anything about fantasy football either. So you're in good company.
That cannot be true. You said Travis Kelce?
Oh, no, he does say Travis Kelce because the Kelce brothers.
I remember that. I remember that story. So that actually shows you're a deep dive guy, not
exactly.
that you That's
not
smart.
Everybody sees it that way, though. So, you know.
I do. I see.
There you go. All right, guys, I'm going to get the draft up on the screen. As I mentioned, it is redraft season, and we are starting off very basic. We have a 12-team draft, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 flex spots. We're only doing 13 rounds. We are not doing kickers and defense. If you've watched this show for any period of time, you know I would tell you would make kickers and defense your last pick if you take them at all. We have Austin picking at the 1. We have Mike picking at the 12. It's going to be a very fun show. We're going to talk a little bit of fantasy football, but first I'm going to go ahead and get this draft started. So Austin's on the clock. I am confident it will not be a timeout situation. We have a minute to make our picks. So Michael, we've been talking a little bit backstage. Yes, starts off with Justin Jefferson. We'll get to that. And you mentioned on a show you did with Zach that you were playing fantasy football before the internet. I too am a pre-internet fantasy football player. But my question to you is going to be, what got you started to fantasy football? What drew you into fantasy football?
I think just the love of football and being a Chicagoan and a Chicago Bears fan, where like, we bleed, football leather out of our pores. Yes. And so I was just always a big, huge football fan. My dad loved football. We'd watch it together, and fantasy just was a natural extension of it for us.
And I think that's so my story is actually very similar. I did not grow up in Chicago, but I grew up in Northeast Ohio in a small town called Massillon that is world famous for high school football, but I was never big enough to be good at football.
Massillon, Massellin, right?
Yeah, ILLON, almost. Oh, okay. But anyway,
oops of the draft so far.
That's fine. I didn't expect you to know Massillon at all. But anyway, I was not big enough to be great at football, but man, I was good at math. And so fantasy football just kind of worked out for me. but our local newspaper, when I was in 5th grade, started running this special where it was almost a precursor to DFS, where you had to pick players from groups, and whoever had the high score won like a $50 gift card to restaurants. Well, I won this thing like 3 weeks in a row, but I had to put it in my mom's name because I was like 10 years old, and you're not allowed to win these contests when you're 10 years old. And then the internet finally happened. And so my first full league was internet. Austin, when did you start playing fantasy football? As long as we've done a show together, I've never asked you that question.
Yeah, so I think I started in 2014 playing in my first fantasy football league. Now, I grew up doing, wait for it, fantasy NASCAR with my dad. Because, I grew up watching NASCAR, and so we did that. And then we would also do like the pick'em league. So we would always, we would do it for the NFL. We would also do it for like the college bowl games. So I grew up doing variations of sports games and guessing and picking of players and whatnot. And then I think it was finally in 2014 when I was in college, I was on my college's drumline, and our director was like, we should start a fantasy football league. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, let's do it. And I started it, and I think I won the first year. We did it on CBS Sports, which I have some things I love about that app and some things I hate about that app. But it was a good time, and it got me hooked because similar to you, Ryan, the numbers get me. I love the stats. If you've read my articles, I love numbers and data, and that's just it took off from there.
All right, Mike, you are up on the turn. I'm going to give you a few seconds to make your pick here.
Once the guy who I wanted got taken, so I got to.
Yeah, that tends to happen when you have the 12th pick. The sniping starts.
I was like, oh, maybe you go there and you think, oh, these guys they'll make it to me, and then no one does.
I want to give a shout out to all our friends in the chat. Our good buddy Elixir's Atlanta Falcons guy wants Bijan going off at 101. It did not happen in this draft, but we're going to talk about Bijan a little bit later. Michael, how many leagues are you in? So I know, like you said, you started a while ago. Has it grown to the point where you're in so many leagues you can't keep track anymore, or do you keep it small?
I mean, no, I definitely am under a half dozen. I was super fortunate and honored to be invited to the Scott Fish last year, and then again this year. So that's an exciting, proposition for any fantasy player. And then in terms of home leagues, I'm in a couple auction leagues. One of them I run, which is an auction keeper league. Okay. And there's going to be a team or two available out there, people. So I may hit you up on Twitter to see if you're interested. And then I'm in a couple standard leagues. And then I was in a league, a 14-team league last year that was like a just for fun league, but had a lot of Twitter people in it, and it was really fun. And hopefully we'll do that again. And so like 4 or 5 basically. And then
I want to go back to what you were bringing up. People have been begging us to do an auction draft. I don't even know if we can do auction mocks on Sleeper. But auction is that it's funny. Auction was one of the first kind of like draft styles, but it's still never like gained the popularity, but it is one of the more fun ways of drafting a fantasy football team.
The actual draft is the funnest. It's the funnest night of the year. Snake drafts, and that's great too, but like the auction draft is just fantastically fun. And it's if you're used to snake, you can't you're like, oh, here's my position. Well, all right, here's 20 guys I just won't get. Just positionally, I just won't. With the auction, you can be like, I want to get these 2 guys, and I don't care, and like you'll get them. Like you just got to put up the money, So I love the auction draft. I would recommend to anyone doing at least one auction draft if you're like a fantasy nut, for sure.
Yeah, I want to bring up just something Josh just brought up in the comments, because we run into this before, is doing an auction draft would be tough because it would take so long to even get through the first few rounds of the draft. There would be teams with no players and teams with a lot of players. It would be interesting. It's something I need to look into, maybe not for this season, but for next season. You hit a very interesting point to me, and I was almost befuddled by this, when this came out on Twitter a few years ago. For folks like you and I who have been playing fantasy football for a very, very long time, live drafts are important to us, and we love it, and we understand how fun it is. There are fantasy analysts who have never done a live draft. And so you brought up, auction, that's like the funnest night of the year, doing those auction drafts. Just kind of sell people on why they need to get together with a group of 10 to 12 friends and do a live draft.
Well, that fantasy really came out of that. It was born of like guys and gals, girls, women
Yes.
wanting to like get together with all their friends, all their football fan friends, and like have this thing together. And like I think the live draft, like scheduling it at a sports bar, or you get the back room at a bar, and like it feels great, and it's just a lot of fun. And I remember the big boards that would have the stickers. Obviously, we've grown past that, but I mean that was just, it just felt like so fun. It just felt like it felt real, more real. It made the fantasy more real. And like I would recommend trying to get everyone together live for a draft. Again, if you run a league, or if like just to see, just because it's just a lot of fun. It's just a great night.
Josh is asking, you brought up your back in Scott Fish for the second year. Scott introduced live drafts last year. Are you going to be in a live draft at all this year?
I am doing, last year I was in the Gotham City League division.
Fitting.
And yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I went there. And so I figured I'll stay with sort of fictional, since I'm sort of part fictional. And so this year, so I can't really do a live draft. There's no Gotham City live draft.
No.
And I'm Krusty Burger this year. So
Okay.
Also, I did want to switch back to sleeper though, because I was in the MLF
MFL.
really, really counterintuitively website. It was like, it made the thing, the playing so much harder. I'm like, how do I can't find anyone. It's like you go to the waiver pool and it's like just a giant list, and you're like, how can I, it was a little crazy.
And if I could just get you to drop your Twitter handle so all the MFL lovers can come at you and not me on Twitter.
Exactly. That was my point of view, not his. So yeah. Hold on. I'm coming up here, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do.
Actually, Austin, I want to go to you because I know you started in fantasy after Michael and I. Have you actually done a live draft? Have you gotten together with people, Austin?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay,
so first off, like whenever I've done leagues, like I was talking about the Drumline League, we did that one in person. But also I have my home league, and we either do it in person or we all get on a Zoom call together if we just can't all get together at the same time or can't make the travel arrangements work. But that league also used to be an auction or a salary cap league, and doing that in person is, I agree, the most fun, particularly when it's with your buddies and you know the players they love. Like one year we had a guy come out the year that Kyle Pitts went number 4 overall in the NFL draft and put on his Kyle Pitts jersey as we were doing the draft. And so during the auction round, when he put Kyle Pitts on the board, we just kept bidding up and making him pay. He ended up paying like $43 out of a $200 budget for Kyle Pitts. And it was great. It was just a ton of fun. And, you know, for me, I just sat back and watched it happen and then won the league that year. So
nice. That is a thing for sure.
Yes, like, and the reaction. There's no describing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, my philosophy is, if you got to decide on guys you want and then just get them, you got to just plow through the numbers, because if you pull back, or if you're like, oh, that went over my expected range for that guy, you're going to end up with a team of mids and you're going to be deeply, deeply unhappy. Like, so you got to walk that line between being obviously bidding like, oh, this guy will pay anything for this guy, let's make sure he does. You know what I mean? You got to like, it's fun, and you got to be a little crafty. You can't give away that like that's what you're up to. But at the same time, you got to get some stars. You've got to get some stars.
Yeah,
so
and I love what you brought up there, though. I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I'm in multiple home leagues filled with Browns fans, and Browns are going to go early. But you also know people like me who are not Browns fans are going to take Browns because I know I'm going to be able to trade them for you for way more than I paid for them later on in the season. So that's real fun. One last question before we actually start talking about the draft here. And there's been some very interesting developments in the draft so far that we're going to get into. I listened to your podcast with our good friend, Zach Berger, where it was kind of behind the analyst. And you said something that struck me right at the end of the show, actually, that you're in, 2 or 3 home leagues, and a lot of them are 2 quarterback leagues. 2 quarterback is kind of a new niche in fantasy football, but it sounds like you've been doing it for a little while. Would you call that your preferred league type?
I would say it's my preferred league. And one of the leagues was quick to get on the 2 QB. One of the leagues I'm in was there at the sort of beginning of that notion. And then another one came along. But I mean, to me, when you think about it, for the size of most leagues, so many QBs are going to waste if you don't do 2 QB, and it just doesn't make sense. And it's like you get sort of challenged because in a 12-team league, obviously there's not enough starting quarterbacks. But in a 10-team league, it works out just about perfect. So you got to be smart. You got to get a third quarterback that is viable. You know what I mean? And I just think it's a better use of the talent pool to do a 2 QB league. And I think that the evolution of fantasy is trending towards like there will be more 2 QB than 1 QB eventually, if not already.
Yeah, we saw Underdog introduce Superflex for I think the first time ever last year.
That's cool. I haven't been there in a while.
Yeah,
I'm just taking my money, but
me too.
It's like, wow, $1 million! I can't wait. And it's like, oh, I'm playing against 1 million people. That's why I can win $1 million.
Exactly. And then you're checking every week to see if your team says advancing or not, knowing that it's not going to matter when you get to the end of the season because you're advancing with like 1,200 points.
Or you do like
18,
7 of them, and like you're in 11th place and 6 of them in 2nd and 1, and you're like, I'm great at this.
I am so good at Underdog. I solved it.
You still think the 2nd place team, you're like, I'm gonna win like $100,000, and it's like, well, slow down, slow your roll.
Calm down there, buddy. Now, what I love is you kind of brought up 2 QB and how it makes quarterbacks more valuable. Austin, we're going to be introducing this a little bit later in the season, but you have a league type that you're very interested in that makes a position almost less valuable, but interestingly so because it's such a runaway position. So let's talk about no tight end, Austin.
Yeah, no tight end is a fun one for me. I also love the receiver flex position. So you can do a tight end or a wide receiver, keeps Travis Kelce relevant. And that's about it. That's all the tight ends you need. I mean, in my opinion, of course, I would love Kyle Pitts to be back up there. And there's the case for him getting up there. But I like it because you don't have to choose between, or you get to choose between starring Noah Fant or Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
In any given week. And you can play Brandon Ayuk, and the person that still has Travis Kelce is still going to have like a 5 to 10 point advantage over you and get the premium that comes with his elite talent. So I like creating that flexibility, and it's just a different strategic mindset you can come at for fantasy leagues. I also love it because it means I don't have to play tight end if I don't want to. So I have a league where we have a receiver flex position. I do not have a tight end on my entire roster. It is a dynasty league, and I'm just like, I'm good. I don't need a tight end. And
don't need
you know what? It's great.
So that's a very non-traditional league. I want to get back to a traditional mindset. So we're going to dive into the draft here a little bit. Michael, one of the things that first jumped out to me, and we are actually talking about this a little bit backstage, is for folks who've been playing as long as we have, it seems counterintuitive to go anywhere but running back in the first round. We saw in today's draft all the way to pick 4 before the first running back, Christian McCaffrey, came off the board. When you are in these newer drafts, very different from probably your home leagues, how do you feel when you see running backs starting to slide like that in drafts?
I mean, like I said, it's the evolution. I get it. I understand it. And like, you know, with a lot of the scoring systems sort of dictate that you should go maybe not. I just object to like not trying to get, you got to get a star, at least one bell cow running back. And then you can build with the sort of like maybe types and like if things go right, this guy is going to, you know, do blank. But like, I understand it. And like, I'm not mad at it. Like these first 3 picks, they make sense to me. I see that. Hold on. Ask him a question because I'm coming up here and I got.
Oh, you're absolutely perfect. Actually, Austin, I want you to lean into this and I love that Mike brought up, you know, 0 RB, hero RB, because it led perfectly what I'm about to ask with my next question. But Austin, let's stick with this. How do we feel about McCaffrey, Eckler, and, you know, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor sliding all the way down to 4 5 with the wide receivers and Travis Kelce going ahead of them?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm a little bit in favor of it because I had the option to take Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan, and I didn't. I went with Justin Jefferson. I think some of this is player context, like Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler. They're getting a little bit older in age. Christian McCaffrey is competing for touches with Elijah Mitchell. Austin Eckler just had this contract dispute, and we don't know if he's going to continue to be kind of the 3-down running back he has been. So I do think some of this is player specific, and I also agree, like this might just be an overreaction. People saying, you know what, it's receivers and that's it, and running backs, you just devalue them. And honestly, that overreaction is what led me to say, I'm going to go with a receiver for my first position, because it means players like Najee Harris, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker, like these are great running backs. They're falling further than they would have. And so you're actually now able to take an elite receiver with your first pick and still have an elite running back most likely come back around to you when it comes to your next pick. So I think, if everybody's doing it, you can take advantage of it. And I also support like going ahead and just sticking with taking a running back in the first round, because like I said, people are overreacting. So it's a good time to zig while everybody's zagging.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in what that zig while others zag. Like if 5 in a row go off the board, you got to like, the more that happens, the more like a big group of one position goes, you got to start looking at the other position. It's like these guys are leaving. And then a lot of times you'll trigger then people behind you to be like, oh shit, he just went from running back to wide receiver. I better grab a wide receiver. And then you've actually created a situation where you can then grab that running back that was right there. You know what I mean? Like 6 guys will then turn away from running back, leaving you sort of the next best running back. And it's really smart, Austin. I totally agree.
I shouldn't be too surprised with the group of drafters we have, but the diversity in this draft is nuts. We have 2 teams flirting with 0 RB, one that was and kind of played chicken. We have Mike going with hero RB, and then so many quarterbacks going so early. So I'm very impressed with everything. But Mike, I want to go back to something you talked about where you said, you need that one bell cow running back. Our good friend J Dubs, the 3rd pick of the draft, is notoriously 0 running back. I'm going to be very interested to see when he takes his first running back in this. And he's also very notoriously high on Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. The only time he doesn't get one of them is if he's in a draft with me, because I am as well. How do you feel about 0 RB? Is this a draft strategy that you'll just shun? I made the comment before the show, and I've made it publicly. I have never drafted a 0 RB team that I was happy with, not one time.
I just can't. I see it happen. Like last year, a lot of people like waited till round 6, round 7, and then their first running back was like AJ Dillon. And I'm like, how that is just, and again, I'm pointing to an example that didn't really work out, obviously. Yeah. And it's like, but that's the risk. You can't, these guys, and I've become a believer in like, you grab these, like guys go down, like running back, like a running back making it all the way without like, I get it. And then other guys emerge. And if you have a little pool of those guys, like you can, through the mid and then the late season, suddenly you've got studs. And I get that, but you've got to have some sort of stability, I think, with at least one of your running backs. One guy who like, you're like, this guy is an every down back. He's the solid starter. He doesn't have a ton of competition. You know what I mean? He's not going to be supplanted. He's youngish, like I just believe you've got to have a guy like that. And like, that means, but like, this is a little rare to me. I wouldn't have only one running back just generally through 6 rounds. Like Pittman probably would have been a running back choice just in my, if you looked at the scope of my fantasy football career, like, I would not do it this way, but I've come to start doing it this way. Like, you know what? I'm going to grab more wide receivers. I'm blathering on, but
no, this is perfect.
For me, historically, it's been easier to identify emerging wide receivers that are going to like rounds like 7 through 12. I've always been better at picking receivers in there that like, wow, that guy's much better than we expected. Like, so I just am not afraid to like not get receivers until the mid-late rounds. And like, so it's been an adjustment for me to like turn that around.
I say this is a very different team you're describing versus what because I am so much like you in that sense that I feel like I could wait to pick all of my receivers till the double-digit rounds, and I'm still going to be absolutely fine when it's said and done.
Right.
Austin, when we look at a team like, sorry, I don't have the names up on the screen right now, like Jacob Lundy right next to you. This is something I always worry about when someone flirts with 0 running back, Austin, that they start off first 4 picks, no running backs, but then they dive in and just take every mid running back known to man. Is that how, if you were forced into a 0 running back situation, you obviously went with a very balanced approach. How do you feel about that? Because I mean, obviously, notoriously, I'm not a fan of Cam Akers. I don't mind his next 2 picks, but I just feel like sometimes folks who start off 0 RB, if it's not their favorite way of drafting, they overcorrect, Austin.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a tendency to revert back really quickly and to get nervous and to be like, okay, I've got to take my running back now. But if you're going to lean into that 0 running back strategy, you've got to just lean into it, get past the discomfort and stick with it. And I think the results will be more satisfactory at the end. I also just think that if you decide to make the shift to running back at round 5, after having not taken a running back, to me in this draft, there are better options you could have gone with than Cam Akers.
Hey, let's save that for the end of the show. That might already be in my show notes. I love Jacob, but it struck me as odd as well. And he's admitting in the draft that this is the least favorite mock he's done in a long while in the chat. So.
Hey, you know what? I've been there. When we did
our
dynasty
that's what
mocks,
this is all about.
I think I hated every one of our dynasty mocks that I did. So, I'm just back in my element and it's nice.
Yeah, it's all about practice. Mike, one thing you brought up, and I don't necessarily want you to get into your team more than I want you to get into the strategy and philosophy. In the chat before we ever got started, you mentioned that this was your first mock draft of the entire year, and you took 12 for a very specific reason, and I loved what you said. So can we talk a little bit about why you started with the 12 slot?
Well, I mean, to me, the both ends, it's easier in the sense that, like, you don't have to, if I'm like 9, 10, or 11, or 2, 3, or 4, I got to look at what's coming. Every time it's coming to me, I got to look, especially on the short end, and be like, well, I need a running back, but let me see. This guy's got 2, he's got 1. It's unlikely these guys are going to take running backs. I can wait. There's just a lot more work if you're not on the ends. And the ends, it's less, it's more fun, so to speak, because you can they're the sort of get your guys spot. It's
literally the phrase I was hoping to hear.
There's no point in thinking like who's likely to be left for like still there 22 picks later. It's like, look, I like this guy. I see that the ADP indicates I'm taking this guy 10, 15 picks too early. But if I don't take him here, I'm not going to get him. So like, I like him. I get it. I see that the experts are like, no, you're picking him 10, but I got to get him. I'm taking him. So like, if you want to just get your guys and not have to worry too much, like, and not stress out during the draft, the ends are like definitely the spot for you.
And that has been a philosophy of mine forever. I do not give anybody a hard time on the ends about any of their picks because it is get your guy territory. And you said it so well. And one thing that you and Austin have really avoided in this draft, but even when it happens on the ends, I don't get mad when folks do it, is you tend to see people on the ends get their quarterback and tight ends very early because they have a guy they really want and they know it's not going to make it back to them in 20 picks. But you guys have actually done a great job of having these positions fall to you without having to worry about it. But it's almost a little scary at times for someone like Austin who hasn't taken a quarterback yet because like, when do you do it?
If I were to guess on Austin, I'd say I feel like he might be a Richardson guy and he's gonna grab that guy towards a little later because you're like, oh, if this works, if this is Cam Newton's rookie year, I'm fucking set. Oh, excuse me. This is a family show. But
it's not. It's really not.
For me was kind of a whatever, but I'm very interested in Lawrence this year and was quite pleased to see him there and to see, I like Fields. I mean, again, I'm a Chicago boy, so I like Fields too, but I'm surprised that Fields went ahead of Lawrence given what he did last year and especially at the end and in the playoffs. Like, I feel like he's on the verge. But I mean, again, you're 100% on my thinking there.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point. And so I wanted to kind of take a look at quarterbacks because when you are in drafts, especially home league drafts, you're going to see quarterbacks go about the same range they went in this draft. A lot of times when you're in industry drafts, it's everyone playing chicken to see who's the idiot who takes his quarterback first. And then someone drafts Josh Allen in the 5th round and wins the league every year.
Right.
But in this one, we saw 5 quarterbacks go in the first 4 rounds. And as you mentioned, we saw Fields and Trevor Lawrence go, 5'8", 5'12". What I found interesting is everyone is kind of like dipped their toe in quarterback with the very few exceptions. But then you see Justin Herbert, who has had a top 5 season. It was back his rookie year. He's taken some steps back. But then he goes way after all of these guys. And then guys like Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa are going all the way in the 8th. Are you, when you're not on the end, how do you feel about quarterbacks? Do you attack getting those elite quarterbacks early, Mike, or do you like to wait? I know you have a pick coming up, so I'll actually start with Austin on this one. Austin, when you're not on the end, what are your thoughts on how the quarterbacks are shaking out on a draft right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's early for most of these quarterbacks. I am reticent to take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds whenever I'm in a redraft league, regardless of where I'm drafting from. If I'm in best ball, sure, there's plenty of reasons to draft a quarterback early, dependent on your roster construction, whatever. But in redraft, I'm sticking to the wait as long as you can on quarterback, because I think there's enough depth there. And I think last year was an outlier season for quarterbacks where we saw 3 quarterbacks really separate from a fantasy perspective. So I prefer to wait until at least the 5th through 8th round. I think that's the range where you're really starting to hit the upside. I think Justin Herbert, where he's going right now, I mean, he's being taken at his floor. I know last year was rough for him, but we forget this is the guy that was popping off for 40 fantasy points as a rookie. Like, why is he going in the 6th round? Last year, we were saying he was the number 1 quarterback for some people. Some people had him above Mahomes and Allen. So the fact that you're getting him in the 6th round to me is just evidence that you should be waiting on quarterback and taking that value when it falls to you.
Yeah, it seems like it's an overcorrection. And that's something we talked about just in general with the ADP of these quarterbacks is last year we saw Allen, Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts kind of run away with the quarterback position. So it's not terribly surprising to see them all go in the first 3 rounds of a fantasy draft. But, and Mike hit on this a little bit earlier, when you see players going, that kind of makes you think, well, I better go get mine. And I found that very interesting. Mike, your guy's going to auto pick ahead of you. So I'm going to still give you a few seconds here to make your pick. But as a Bears fan, what I'm going to tee you up on here is I do want you to talk about Justin Fields a little bit, because we saw out of Justin Fields last year an elite rushing upside. We saw one of the best runs I've seen from any player, let alone a quarterback, in years from Justin Fields. But he was not a great thrower of the football, but this year they go out and they get him a number 1 wide receiver in DJ Moore. As a Bears fan, you have to be pretty excited, but as a fantasy manager, you mentioned you were a little shocked that Fields even went ahead of Lawrence.
I love Fields, and I think he can get there for sure. And there are a lot of great running quarterbacks in the league right now, but he's freaking phenomenal. Like I feel like he's as fast as Lamar, and he's big, and like I saw so many runs where like he went up the seam, like sort of between the tackles, and then would go 50, 60 yards. And it's like, wow. Like, I think that's just so dangerous. And I think their run game is going to be super challenging for defenses. And I think he's got the dedication and the will. It seems like the champion's will to sort of do it, to get better at the passing and the accuracy. And like, I think he's a phenomenal talent prospect. I just think for redraft this year, I'm a little more comfortable with Trevor Lawrence. I think he clearly clearly there was a head coaching problem his rookie year.
Yes, there was.
He put a fine point on that all year last year. Like, look, I suffered not because I can't do this like my rookie year. Like, watch this. Like, I just think, they're adding what a lot of people think is a top 5 wide receiver talent wise, Ridley. Like, so they're right there, and they're like a team on the upswing, like just at every facet. And I expect that that whole team, led by him, is going to be very, very good this year. But again, I love Fields. I would love to see. I personally think that the Lions are going to win that division, but I think Chicago may be second in that division. And whether that's going to be good enough for a wild card spot or not, I don't know. But I think they're going to be much improved. I think what's his name? The new GM, is it Adam something? I'm blanking on the GM, the Bears GM, but I think he did a great.
It's not Ryan Poles, is it?
Yeah, Poles.
Yeah,
Ryan.
Yeah.
He did a great job this offseason, and I think they're going to be really, really good.
Yeah, it's really hard to be mad at anything the Bears did this offseason.
They may end up with the number 1 pick next year because they've got Carolina's pick. So like
because of that just awful trade.
A brilliant trade. Like just everything about that was like, wow, you guys won that like all day.
And that could be a franchise-changing trade because if they trade the number 1 pick again next year, though, I think they'll be tempted to grab Marvin Harrison Jr. But if they trade again next year,
I mean, if he plays like he did, I mean, if he finishes his college career like he's the rest of it, how do you not like salivate at the idea of getting that guy?
Yeah, you can't look at Justin Jefferson and
all
not
32 QBs in the league will come up to the front office and be like, "Hey, man, get this guy for me." For God's sake.
100% every single time. I want to draw your guys' attentions to 2 quick teams. One thing I want to point out for those who are just tuning in for the first time, at the end of the show, I will have Austin and Mike talk about their drafts, talk about if they had a strategy and if it needed to change. There are 2 teams picking very close to each other. Coach Trav at the 1-8 spot and Don Flicht at the 1-10 spot. And Don Flicht had said he had a few auto drafts because he's at work right now. Thank you for joining the show and putting your job on the line there, Don. We appreciate you, buddy. But they built their teams very differently. Coach Trav, heavy wide receiver, doesn't get his first running back till the 7th round, but my goodness, what a first running back with David Montgomery and then even Alexander Mattison, assuming Dalvin Cook goes. Don Flick starts off completely running back and went kind of hero wide receiver with Terry McLaurin. When you guys look at these 2 teams, plain and simple, which one do you feel more comfortable with if it were your team heading into a fantasy season, Austin?
I don't love either. Like, if I have to pick feet to the fire, I'm going to go with Coach Trav just because there's more receiver depth there and you've got the target sharing up. But similar to what we were talking about earlier, the running backs still make me nervous. Alexander Mattison, if Dalvin Cook does depart Minnesota, which it seems like he's going to, then yes, this is an incredible value pick because Mattison could be a top 12 player. So I think for that reason, I would pick Coach Trav's team. The issue is like I don't love like Jerry Jeudy as my 3rd, or I guess that's 4th receiver, and so that's a starting wide receiver in this league because we have 2 flex spots. So I would have wanted a little bit more receiver depth and maybe like a anchor running back that I feel confident in. Like with all 3 of these players, Montgomery, Madison, and Dillon, there's some projection involved, right? Yeah. So you're betting on them to have that ceiling outcome. For Don Flick, like he had some auto picks at the beginning, so that is what it is. I would have, after the first 2 picks, I would have transitioned to wide receiver just because you have those anchor running backs. But given the way things shook out, I would go with Coach Trav.
Mike, same question. Just look at these 2 teams because how they were differently built.
Which 2 am I looking at? I'm so sorry.
No, you're absolutely fine. Coach Trav, which is starting with the 8th pick with Tyreek Hill, and then Don Flick starting with the 10th pick at Bijan Robinson.
Wow, it's like a study in contrasts.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I feel like just initially, and I just lost 8 and 12. Yeah, I mean, I feel like his big 4, his 4 horsemen wide receivers are a little stronger than, although those first 3, Robinson, Henry, and Walker. I had Nixon last year and was like a big booster and kind of outside of one very notable and memorable game.
Yeah,
kind of didn't love my results there, but I feel like I would lean towards Coach Trav too. I'm a little worried about Tua versus Fields. Yeah, and then just the paucity, big word, right?
Yes.
Of wide receivers for Don Flicht would be scary to me. Yeah, so I think I'm with you, Austin. That's if I had to choose one of those teams, like to take over, I would probably be more comfortable with Trav. And again, the Madison thing, it all sort of hinges on that. Like,
yeah, I was going to say where I feel more comfortable is the fact that you guys only have to start 2 running backs. And I love David Montgomery sliding into that Jamal Williams role. And then his ability to start 4 of these wide receivers. Where Don Flick can start 4 of these running backs, where I feel like the mistake was, and he was auto drafting for some of these, adding his next 2 backup running backs before filling his starting receivers and going 6 deep. I think that was just kind of the small mistake with this one. I've been trying to add a keep trade cut question for a while to this show because I just think that's fun. And they all went right near each other. And it's even better that one of our people today is a Chicago Bears fan. So I've literally had this on the show sheet for 3 weeks now, because if you followed the show for any period of time, you know we hate Cole Kmet. So the question, Mike, is keep trade cut. They all just went very close to each other. Greg Dulcich, Chigoziem Okonkwo, and Cole Kmet. So your fantasy team, who are you keeping? Who are you trading? Who are you cutting with these 3 young tight ends?
I guess I'd keep Okonkwo, and I would try and trade Dulcich, and I'd cut Kmet.
Wow. The Bears fans cutting Cole Kmet.
This is not exactly my wheelhouse.
That's absolutely fine. You answered the question properly, because anytime you're cutting Cole Kmet,
I think you can just get, like, Dulcich has more trade value than Kmet. I think personally, like, if you were to test the waters, you would find more return. That's why I did it that way. And Okonkwo is like the huge upside guy, and so like that's the guy who I want to roll with.
That's exactly how I would have done it myself. Austin, how about you?
Yeah, similar. I would keep Greg Dulcich, trade Chico Okonkwo, and I would definitely cut Cole Kmet. Like, that's like. That one's
heard
easy.
it here first. Cut Cole Kmet. Every fantasy team, get rid of him.
I mean, the thing with Cole Kmet, first off, he's got way more competition for targets this year.
Yeah.
And last season, he had a lot of touchdowns relative to his prior season, and so it was
relative to his targets.
Right, and it was a clear regression play, and so I expect him to regress again this year and have fewer touchdowns. And without those touchdowns, what value does he have? He's not getting enough targets, and now he's got DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney all competing for receptions. So I'm down on Cole Kmet. Just cut him. You're not going to get any good value for him. Chico Okonkwo, I think he's the good trade candidate here, because I think the fantasy community is very in on Chig this year. Like, he is the shiny new tight end that everyone's expecting to make that second year leap. And so I think this is a good opportunity to trade him sell high and trade him for a more elite player. And then later on in the season, when the Tennessee Titans offense continues to run through Derrick Henry and is just kind of meh overall, you'll be happy that he's not bringing you down.
Yeah, Josh is saying you're slandering Okonkwo, but you actually went where I thought you were going to go with that, is he just has the most trade value of the 3, and we all 3 would agree that Cole Kmet has no trade value.
Yeah. Also, the big thing that people are in on Okonkwo for is the fact that he led the league in yards per routes run last year. Guess what? He also had the fewest targets out of most of the people at the top of that metric. And so, yeah, when you don't have as many targets and as many catches to give information to that data point, you're going to have a tendency to have a higher yard per route run. The more targets you are getting, inherently, the lower your yards per route run are going to be. And so it's just that he happened to get targeted when he was running routes, not necessarily that he was getting the volume that he will need to be a top 5 tight end.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Guys, we're getting close to the end of the draft. What's going to happen here is I'm going to have Austin and Mike just basically go through their 2 teams as we finish up the draft here. We'll talk a little bit about the oops of the draft. I think there were 2 kind of mistakes made that I didn't love. Mike, you'll be happy to know you're not a part of either one of them. So you did it. You made it through the draft without me giving you a hard time. Yeah. You know what? Austin, you are finished up, so we're going to give Mike time to make his last pick. Let's go ahead and just start with your team. So you decided to start your draft from the 1 spot. Did you have a plan coming into this draft? Was that plan forced to change? You know how it goes, buddy.
Yeah, so I did take the 1 spot, and I've just been using like my Google device to pick my draft spot the past few weeks, because I can't decide. So I get someone else to decide for me. I'll offload that decision, and hey, they gave me the 1 spot this week, so I went for it. My strategy was to not pick a running back with the first pick and to take a quarterback with my last pick. And so I wanted to see what would happen if I just completely punted the quarterback position. And look, I got Kirk Cousins, QB 6 last year. Come on. QB 11 the 2 years before that.
And a stack to go with your Justin Jefferson, which is ridiculous.
Like, the Kirk Cousins slander needs to end. I was hoping to get Daniel Jones frankly.
Yeah,
But
you're a big Daniel Jones. You're just loving these unlovable quarterbacks this year, buddy.
yeah, you got to zig when everyone else zags.
Exactly.
But Daniel Jones, he got taken on an auto pick, so I didn't get to pick him. But I would have taken him with my last pick if available. He ran for 700 yards last year. We talk about loving rushing quarterbacks, and he is the cheapest rushing quarterback available right now, outside of Anthony Richardson, who I'm still not convinced starts all 17 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, you walked right into that one. Austin is the only human being on the planet who does not believe the Colts are going to start Anthony Richardson week 1.
Wow.
So,
I mean, I'm with you in the sense that I'm not 100% sure this is going to be a great year for him.
yeah.
But it's going to be a big adjustment, like speed and talent wise, like what he's going to be looking at. And like,
also, people are like, "Oh, Shane Steichen, he just did this with Jalen Hurts," and I'm like, "Yeah, do you remember what he did the first year with
Yeah, it was a
Jalen
little
Hurts?
different.
He ran the damn ball and had 3 running backs just rushing nonstop." So
Right.
I think we should slow our roll on Anthony Richardson being a top 10 quarterback. That's just me. Other than that, I love how my draft panned out.
Super balanced.
Yeah, getting Mike Evans as my wide receiver 4, I'm also very happy with. I'm
That's
going to do an article on him, get into the weeds on his fantasy value this year. But hey, as my 4th pick for the upside, sure, why not? And then Darren Waller falling to the 7th round, like we are just assuming, hey, he's had 2 consecutive years where he's been hurt. He's done. He's no longer elite. But we said the same thing about Christian McCaffrey, and then look what happened. So I'm just not going to buy into the narrative that he's hurt, he's been hurt, and he's just injury prone, and so he's done for. I'm going to go in on the upside play there, particularly because who's his competition for targets in New York?
Wan'Dale Robinson.
Exactly.
Coming off of ACL injuries. So I love the value on Darren Waller there. If I didn't get him there, I was just going to punt the tight end position as well and probably go stream tight end throughout the season. But I really like how this team panned out. Running back got a little rough towards the end. I'm not thrilled with Jamal Williams, but I'm good with Damian Harris. I like the upside there. Like
For me, it's the exact opposite.
I mean, hey, Damian Harris, he's got a chance to get some touchdowns this year. The Buffalo Bills, they need to be able to run the ball. They started building their offensive line a little bit more this offseason. So I like the chances of him just getting red zone touches and kind of taking away from
your other
Josh
Harris RB a lot better. Like I really think he should look a lot more like his rookie year than he did his second year. And like
that.
I think if you look at the last 3 or 4 games last year, when it's clear that foot was a problem, like for the first 75% of the season, and like he seemed to come back to his abilities towards the end, and like he's a sneaky upside guy this year. I think he's going to be a good value. I think if you get him,
I like that a lot. Mike, let's just move over to your. Oh, sorry, Austin. Go ahead.
I was just saying I love that, and then I'll add if you're playing best ball, Pittsburgh and Seattle play week 17.
Oh, your correlation.
So that's going to be a fun game.
55 to 52 final.
There we go.
A lot of touchdowns.
Mike, you don't have to describe every player on your team, but you absolutely can if you want. We have plenty of time. But most importantly, you said this was get your guy territory. So is that how it shook out to you? And there's one player I definitely want you to talk about. DeAndre Hopkins at 3 might scare some people off, but I don't think people realize how good DeAndre Hopkins was when he played last year. But more importantly, do you have a landing spot you'd like to see him end up in?
Well, I mean, he's going to go somewhere, and he's going to be he's going to be either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 1A, like wherever he ends up. And he's so good. He's so talented. He's still, he hasn't taken a lot of shots. He's not ancient. I think he's been a guy that people are like, no, I'm out on him this year. And it's like, so far they've been wrong to take that road.
Yes.
And I just I wanted other guys. I certainly would have snapped up Higgins or Smith, who were the 2 who went before him, or Olav further down. But that was the group, And I've never been a huge Amari Cooper guy. I think Keenan Allen is much more in the sort of like he's aging and quickly. Deebo Samuel is I'm just naming the group sort of around him. I knew I wanted a wide receiver, and like he just was sort of the default, like, well, this is, he's going to go somewhere. In terms of landing spots, Buffalo would be great. Kansas City, like these teams that they're talking about where he might end up. All Cleveland, they all sound pretty good to me. I haven't heard a play like, well, this team is really heavily into negotiations. It may happen where I've been like, oh, that's no good.
I'll throw one at you. The Patriots. He keeps getting connected there, and I hate that for him. And I just don't think it would be great. I'm not a fan of the Patriots.
How much choice does he have? Because I didn't even hear that. Like, I thought he loved Buffalo. Kansas City somehow always has money for superstars, and like they go get them. Like that would be just an embarrassment of riches. Like,
so the Patriots are just floated because Bill O'Brien is their offensive coordinator, and Hopkins had his best years with Bill O'Brien in Houston. I think that's the connection. I don't think he ends up there, but if that is where he ends up, it will break my heart because I love DeAndre.
But they're saying Cleveland too because he just signed with an agent, right? Who represents like a lot of Cleveland guys.
Exactly.
And they think, oh, that's an indication.
And like, the Deshaun Watson connection. So.
And I just thought for where he was like, again, it was get your guys, but the guys I wanted, and it was like sort of hoping against hope. I was like, well, maybe I can end up with Bijan and Lamb. And of course they went 10 and 11.
Yeah.
So I was like, crap. Like I'm not a giant Jacobs guy, but like, he's definitely, like I said, he's the volume king. Like he's going nowhere in terms of like 3rd and long or 3rd and short or 1st and 20. Like he's there. He's the running back. He can catch the ball. Like, he was who was left, who I was like, all right, this is my stud running back. And then I had AJ Brown. I was a big Brown guy last year, and that paid off. And I was like, all right, well, I'll go with Brown. There were a couple other guys. Like if you take Diggs or even Amon-Ra over Brown, I could see that. Like, but I prefer Brown, and I just think that Philadelphia is going to pick up where they left off, and that offense is going to be super potent. And so that was the early rounds. Kittle, I was like, well, what's around? Kittle looked, again, another guy who returned to form last year. And I was like, wow, that guy, when he's right and when they actively work him into the offense, he's fantastic tight end. So I'll grab him. Took Lawrence, like I said, because I wanted him. Pittman, again, I felt like I need a 3rd wide receiver.
Yeah.
He, to me, is the best bet of what's left. And then I've been hearing a lot of people like Cook this year. And then I grabbed a bunch of rookies, which I
was going to say, you, for your end of your draft, did a lot of guys who are kind of the new shiny toy that we want to see. James Cook, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Devin Achane, Jamison Williams, and then even Tajay Spears 2 picks later. It seems like you, at the end of the draft, you're ready for these guys that are maybe ready to explode that we haven't seen it from yet.
I definitely do that. And I'm a big believer in like the mid guys that, like, to me, they're known entities, like barring some sort of tectonic shift in their situation, team, coaching, personnel, like I'm like, I know what this guy's going to do. Yeah. So in round 10, that's not useful to me. This guy, it probably stems from Alvin Kamara's rookie year in my auction league. We paid $1 for Alvin Kamara. He was behind. Adrian Peterson was the 2nd running back at that point in the draft. So like he was buried, and everyone was like, Kamara, who didn't he shared time in college, and it was like, so since then I'm like, you know what, I would rather, because these rookies, again, when I was a younger man, rookies, especially rookie wide receivers, they generally, the rule of thumb was they're not going to do much, if anything, their rookie year. But that has totally changed. And like, I would rather take a chance on a rookie who, like, circumstances may fall right and they may be a stud this year. Like, it's unlikely to me that some guy who's been a Jag, just sort of a journeyman, like, with some talent, but not like, is going to do something radically different. So that's why at that point in the draft, I start to sort of look at, like, I guess you could call them dart throws, but to me, they're
good.
They're more
lottery tickets.
Yeah, exactly. But that explains the basically the second half of my draft, I guess.
No, it's great. So I had some debate on Oops of the Draft. I was going to pick on Cam Akers, but anybody who's seen me do this show ever knows that I constantly pick on Cam Akers. I'm going to give my buddy Don Flicht a little bit more of a hard time. It's really what we were talking about. 6 running backs before you're taking your wide receiver 2. And then I just don't know about Juju, Darnell Mooney, and Jonathan Mingo as your wide receiver 2. I understand you only have to start one of those guys. And then you have Mooney and Cole Kmet on an offense that could favor running the football, and then you add a second running back instead of continuing to load up at wide receiver. It's all love, Don. Obviously, it's a mock draft. The point is to learn, and what I would hope folks learn from this is don't focus so much on always taking best player available. There's a point where you need to actually get your roster. In a real league, maybe you could make some trades and change that up a little bit. Guys, that is the end of the show. First and foremost, Michael, you crushed it, my friend. What a great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Anytime, man. That was a lot of fun.
Tell people where they can follow you on Twitter. If you're working on anything, and it does not need to be fantasy football related, if you have any great shows or anything coming up, let us know.
I am at Mike Stoyanov, just like
Okay.
it's spelled right there. And yeah, come give me a follow. That'd be awesome. I'm mostly 99% football. Every once in a while, I'll stray into current events and politics, but just ignore that. Just ignore that. Everyone's got opinions.
Actually, don't ignore it, because I agree with almost everything he posts. So obviously, he's very smart. So don't ignore anything that he posts.
This is I'm turning pink. That's
what I do.
Yeah, I'm at Mike Stoyanov, and yeah, if you follow, that'd be amazing. I tend to follow back, so I'd love to see you. And again, thanks so much, guys. I had a super fun time.
You crushed it, buddy. Austin, what you got going right now, buddy?
Yeah, I think my Kyle Pitts article is dropping today at clubfantasyffl.com. Yeah, so we're running it back. I wrote about Kyle Pitts last year. I was wrong. I wrote about him again this year. I'm hoping to be right. And then later this week, I'll have a Chase Claypool article dropping, because everybody wants to read about Chase Claypool.
I can't wait for that one.
I'm mad that I have to edit it. I hate you so much right now.
Oh, right. But Ryan, I can get real convincing if I just get the numbers.
Yeah, you'll probably have me loving Chase Claypool by the time.
I'll have you drafting him in the 6th round. That'd be great.
All
Or
right,
I'll tell you to not draft him. We'll see. TBD.
Yeah. There you go. Look out for those articles. And then I'll have a Devontae Adams dropping in the middle of the week. So you'll see Kyle Pitts today, Devontae Adams on Wednesday, and Chase Claypool on Friday. Yay. Let's go over the quick schedule, guys. As you know, this show is every Monday, but on Tuesday, we have 2 great Women of Fantasy Football shows. We have our Golf DFS show with Kelly and Adam, and then new episodes of Her Story in the Making with Britt Flynn every other week. Make sure you're checking those out. A few weeks ago, we had the great Lisa Ann on Her Story in the Making. Every Wednesday, we have our flagship show, no pun intended. We are continuing our Closer Look series, our Look Inside series, rather. This week, we're only covering 2 teams, Raiders and Falcons, but we're going to have a very special segment. You do not want to miss that show live at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, except if I remember correctly, Josh just told me we're going later, so it might be 8:30. I'm sure he'll correct me in the chat. Every Sunday, we have Dynasty After Party, and they are following our Look Inside series. The latest episode was just last night, and they covered the Colts, Broncos, and Rams. And as I mentioned, this show, every single week, Monday at 11 o'clock. If you're not following us on Twitter, make sure you fix that at Club Fantasy FFL. We drop the link to draft with us every Monday at 9. The draft goes off at 11. Josh did just correct me. We are going off at 8:15 Eastern this week. It's going to be a very great episode. Thank you for everyone who drafted with us. Thank you for Michael and Austin. And thank you guys for tuning in and watching the show. Please remember that defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you at the next mock draft.